We're in the BI Platform studio, and I'm speaking with Mike Ferguson, Managing Director of Intelligent Business Strategies. Mike, at our summit, the Data Warehousing and BI Summit, you spoke about migrating your data warehouse to the cloud. What are the most important reasons for organizations to move their data warehouse to the cloud?
I think there's probably two types of reasons. I think there are business reasons and there are technical reasons. On the business reason side, obviously the switch from capital expenditure to operational expenditure, and also, if your existing data warehouse is already at capacity and there's plans for more data sources, that could exceed that capacity and cause an expensive upgrade, then that's also another good business reason for doing it. There could be other reasons, end of support. For example, some time ago, IBM announced end of support for some Netezza systems, which sparked a flurry of marketing around migration to move to other databases from IBM's competitors. So kind of end of life, if you like, in a technology would trigger it also. But sticking with business, I think, the cheaper cloud storage, reduced admin costs, those are all business reasons. On the technical side, I think it's more like, well, again, I think lower storage costs is a technical reason, primarily because the amount of staging tables and things like that you would see in a data warehouse, especially with data sources growing in number and the volume of data growing also, would be a factor influencing technical specialists, if you like. I think also the separation of storage from compute, in terms of separately scaling those contributes. And also, if there's several data sources already in the cloud, for example, the adoption of software as a service applications, which is, very, very popular these days. As more and more of those get adopted, more and more of your sources are in the cloud anyway. And so moving your data warehouse to the cloud seems to be a logical step in order to then keep everything in that environment. Perhaps other things as well, like a new complex analytical workload, project may appear that's just not going to be possible on the existing capacity of your existing data warehouse, which would also be a technical reason that would potentially drive it. And then, of course, there's other cloud services around data and analytics that, from a technical standpoint, might make sense. The obvious one being machine learning, as we can now use machine learning and deploy models in data warehouses these days. Bringing those two worlds of data science and data warehousing together is a big temptation that companies want to do. So I think those are probably the main ones both on the business and the technical side.
Right. What do organizations need to look for when making a choice between different vendors of cloud data warehouse solutions?
That's a big question because there's so much choice these days. Almost every single on-premise database vendor that you would expect to see, sort of competing for data warehousing business is already in the cloud. And so I think there's a number of factors before you just get excited about new databases and get sucked into hype. I think you have to look at this from a very logical standpoint. I think you have to look at it from, have they got any other customers with similar workloads and with a similar expected growth path that you may be, looking at? What about the customer support and their migration expertise? I mean, is this just, well, if you switch to our database, that's great, thanks very much, but we don't help you at all in the migration? I think that's pretty poor. I mean, companies need, especially if they're switching databases. I mean, if it's staying with the same database, I don't think it's so much of an issue. But if you're switching databases, I think people really need expertise to help them make sure they're doing everything that they should be doing, and there's no surprises during a migration. Obviously, migration tools, any tools that can help with the migration process to speed it up, to reduce the risk, and hopefully shield that, from business users. I think clearly scalability and performance are important. There's a lot of talk about this, but I think it's got to be the case that whatever you're migrating to is going to perform at least as equally as good as what you currently have. So I think that's a major factor also. Without a doubt, when you move to the cloud, cost is always a consideration. It becomes part of the, I would say, everyday thought process.
Yeah.
It's not a one-off thing we have to worry about. I think it becomes ingrained into data warehouse teams once they've migrated over into the cloud. And so I really think easy cost calculations, easy cost monitoring is a very important thing, especially because chief financial officers are sitting in the background, funding all of this, and they're really, really worried about it. They don't want unexpected bills. They want to know, that this cost is manageable and it's being monitored and on top of it. So I think these things all matter. It's not all massive technical reasons behind it. I think also, obviously, other data and analytics technologies um, that integrate with the platform you're moving to is another factor. Because again, I think companies want deeper integration between analytical workloads that have, they say, up until now been fairly siloed. Graph analytics, streaming, data science, data warehousing, they've all kind of been siloed. And I think companies want deeper integration there to bring those worlds together. And of course, if there's any kind of free trial, I don't just mean, what I mean is like, well, let's try out one of our real workloads in a free trial basis so that you're forcing the vendor to prove themselves. I think that's a key factor as well. So I think all of these kind of things um, are some of the things that I would look for, not just, the pure technical reasons getting sucked into the technology. There's a lot of factors here that need to be considered. Obvious one, for example, the cost, as I said already. But for example, there a lot of database vendors charge you by how many rows you scan.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think many chief financial officers have much of an idea of how many SQL statements go into their data warehouse without a where clause. I mean, so um, they need to stay on top of this. They don't want to know that hundreds of users are launching SQL queries without where clauses and scanning every possible row in the database and then getting hit for an enormous bill out of it. I mean, these are the kind of things that they're small things, but they really matter at the end of the day, because when that bill comes in, if it's a shock, you're going to know about it because the CFO may be turning up at your data warehouse team meeting.
Yeah. Some of the benefits of moving your data warehouse to the cloud might only be realized when you do a complete redesign. However, from a risk and timer perspective, an as-is migration might be preferred. Which option would you prefer?
It's not something you could say you prefer. I think it really depends that you would have to do a complete assessment of your existing data warehouse to understand, what you're happy with and what you're not happy with. I mean, it could be that you're quite happy with your existing design, and it's performing well and all of that. So in that sense, I don't necessarily need necessarily a redesign. I think if you do a complete redesign, for example, going from an Inman design to a data vault or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a data warehouse migration. That's more like a data migration. You redesign and then just migrate the data, because something like that is a monumental change. And I guess the only thing I would say here is that, if you're going to, let's say, do that as part of a modernization, You know, I mean, there's a difference between modernization and migration. And the one thing I would say is it's much better to modernize before or after the migration, but not during it.
During, yeah,
If you do it during it, then you're really going to significantly increase the risk of a potential failure in your migration or unexpected problems you just didn't think about. I mean, a dramatic change like going from something like an Inman design or a Kimball design to a data vault, you know, really is major surgery, is what I would call that. You know, I mean, that's many more tables. The ETL jobs would all be redesigned. I mean, it's practically a complete rebuild almost. And so undertaking something like that is not a small task, especially since some of these systems go back 10, 15 years, you know, maybe longer in some cases. So yeah, I would say that you know, a complete redesign, you know, is not is you know, there's always a temptation on a migration. You know, let's, while we're at it, let's do this, let's do that. The two most obvious things that come to mind are, you know, let's change the database and let's also change the design. But if it's a complete redesign, like the example I gave, then you know, it's certainly not something that I would want to necessarily undertake in its entirety during a migration. I mean, it's something I would prefer to do at least some of that before a migration, which would hopefully reduce the risk on the migration and simplify the migration, speed it up, and then maybe complete the rest of it afterwards. But if you really are going to rip apart and rebuild a complete data model, then it's not really a data warehouse migration. I mean, it's just a data migration in that case, in my opinion.
as an analyst, you're continuously monitoring all the developments in the cloud data warehousing area. What is, in your opinion, what are some of the latest developments in this area that you're excited about?
I think there's a couple of things that excite me. I mean, first of all, is data ops. I mean, for me, this is an area where the emergence of data fabric software together with catalogs. I'm not a fan of buying a catalog from vendor X and data fabric from vendor Y. I really think you can't assume these things snap together and integrate because there's no metadata standard to make that possible. So for me, I think if you get those from the same vendor, then potentially the ability to kind of do to data warehousing what we did in software development. You know, we went from monolithic applications to microservices. I think the same thing's going to happen in data warehousing. We're going to go to component-based development and really industrialization of pipelines to hold completely speed that up, to make it much easier to maintain, much cleaner and simpler to do these things, much quicker to implement change. So I think data ops for me is a bit of a game changer. Um, I think as well the automation. You know, we've already seen artificial intelligence being built into all kinds of software already. It's built into BI tools. It's built into self-service data preparation tools. It's going into mainstream ETL, if you like. It's going in everywhere, and going into databases to help improve optimizers and things like that. So I think the whole automation side for me is enormous, and that's really got a massive business sponsorship behind it as well, because that's what I think executives want out of AI. They want to automate things, get rid of mundane things. They want to reduce that cost or take it away and make it much more efficient. So it helps to reduce cost, make things more efficient, help speed things up. Um, and clearly, as more and more data is changing around them, that they want the ability to speed up the ability to act, you know, to shorten the time to action. So I think automation is a big factor. I suppose on top of that, I would say the integration with data science and data warehousing excites me. Um, for too long now they've been kind of separate, and I think greater desire to integrate those things. So for me, in that sense, I think bringing those together to deploy models that have been developed by data science, and put them in a data warehouse so they can be used by business analysts. In other words, the output of data science becomes the input to business analysis, and then we have integration where we're really starting to use the models that have been produced. I think a lot of executives are a little bit tired of a decade of development, and what they want now is to put it to work. They want it to be, the focus is, okay, how do we use this to really make a difference in our improving our and optimizing our operations, or to seize new opportunities to grow revenue and also to reduce risk. I mean, I think these are, the integration of data science and data warehousing, I think, excites me. Also, I believe we're about to see a huge boost in, I guess what we used to call embedded analytics or operational BI or these kinds of things. I think we're going to see a huge lift in that going forward. But the big difference, I hope, is that it's not just professional developers that we have to wait for to kind of make use of this analytics and integrate it within applications. I think we really need to get the citizen developers using all of this and maximizing the value that's coming from it, because I think that's the frustration at the moment amongst a lot of executives. Is you seem to be building all of this, but it's not getting out into the business as much as it, as quick as it should be, and I think that's those things excite me a lot.
Okay, well, Mike, thank you very much for your insights and the interview. Cheers.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thanks.